Good evening and welcome everybody to the public hearing for the City of Plant City. Welcome to the September 14, 2021 public hearing of the Planning Commission on the City of Plant City Comprehensive Plan Amendments. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation is encouraged. To minimize feedback in the audio, all participants in the meeting will be muted until it is their opportunity to speak. Planning commissioners should raise their hand or mute themselves and turn on their camera to indicate that they would like to speak. Please be sure to state your name at the beginning of your remarks for the benefit of the clerk. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments when your name is called. You will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments and adhere to the time limits. If anyone has difficulties or is watching via HTV and would like to provide comments to be included in the record for local government hearing, please email them to planner@plancom.org. That's planner@plancom.org. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chairman. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will then ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that, I'll ask the clerk to please go ahead and call roll.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bernstein?
Here.
Cardenas?
Here.
Dickerson?
Here.
Dix?
Here.
Dowdy?
Here.
Handy? Handy? Kress?
Here.
Linkus? Linkus? Marino?
Here.
Howell?
Here.
Rodriguez? Here. Joseph?
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, the first item, I guess the only item up for business tonight is Pccpa 21-04, Future Land Use Map Amendment, south of South Frontage Road, east of Sunken Road, and the presenter will be Mark Hudson.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff. Can you see my slide presentation?
Yes.
Great. We have one plan amendment that we are processing for the City of Plant City this cycle. As the chairman already noted, it's Pccpa 21-04. This is the location of the plan amendment. More specifically, it's located on south of South Frontage Road, east of Sunken Road, north of East Baker Street, which some people know as US 92, and west of Charlie Taylor Road, located by the star on Plant City's vision map to your right. I'll note that this is the development is located on South Frontage Road, which has direct access to both Park and County Line Road, which have interchanges with Interstate 4. This is a little bit closer aerial of the property that is being affected by this plan amendment. I apologize, the aerial is a little bit dated, but I'll show you some of the more recent photos of the site in a moment. But the affected area is circled by the lavender dashed line. The applicant already controls land to the north, east, and south, and that is being developed as a project known as City Furniture Incorporated. And some of you may have seen that development going on already along Interstate 4, and I have some slides of that as well. Across Sunken Road is a man-made water feature, and north of that is a multifamily apartment complex. Going south along Sunken Road are some single-family homes on large lots, and once you get to US 92 or East Baker Street, there are located at that intersection are some commercial and industrial activities in unincorporated Hillsborough County.
What's up?
A little bit of background. This is been privately initiated. It's being processed as part of annexation and also plan development zoning. It's a small scale amendment coming in under 1 acre. Its current land use is Hillsborough County Residential 1, and the applicant has requested Plant City mixed-use residential commercial, and for also the area to be under the I-4 Tech Corridor overlay. This is the future land use map as it is today, and in this case you can see the affected plan amendment area surrounded by the black dashed line. To the north, east, and south has the mixed-use residential commercial plan category that the applicant is requesting. You can see the dark yellow for the Plant City.
This one's still bugging.
Plant City Residential 12, which represents the multifamily complex. And directly across the street is Hillsborough County Residential 1, and also further south along Sunken Road is that land use category as well. And this shows you how that would change if it was approved by the Plant City City Commission to basically match the land use designations to the north, east, and south. I did want to show you this slide as well. There is an overlay district in this area called the I-4 Tech Overlay, and that allows some additional uses that generate employment opportunities for the community, particularly those that represent higher paid employment opportunities. And the applicant's remaining portion of their property that they're developing for this furniture showroom and warehouse is already within that plan category to the north and to the east, and they want to incorporate this one as well. I did include this slide as not the best slide in the world, but for a question that was posed by Commissioner Handy at our briefing, and it just shows you the property in relationship to the overall development for City Furniture. The whole area that they're involved with encompasses the area surrounded by the highlighted, I guess it's a green and blue line. They also have some land to the south. I believe the applicant has a PowerPoint as well, and I think they have perhaps a better slide indicating the overall size of the development. The development footprint is being shifted to the west to avoid some natural preservation lands that are shown on this graphic to the east. And there are no proposed development as far as square footage on this property. My understanding is primarily being used for an access point. So we did analyze this based on maximum build out. Existing is one dwelling unit, as you might expect with a Hillsborough County Residential 1 land use category and being under an acre. Theoretically, you could put 10 units on that with the new plan category. However, we know that that is not the intent of the applicant. So we concentrated on the development potential of a little over 13,000 square feet of commercial uses, or just under 20,000 square feet of light industrial uses. I do have some other photographs to give you a little bit better idea of the character of the area, so you can make an informed decision on this application. This shows you the house that's currently resides on the affected parcel. And this is a close-up of that house. When I was out there, I believe the house is currently vacant, but it did have access to Sunken Road. This is a little bit dated photograph I took a month and a half or so ago. This is City Furniture Incorporated. It is my understanding it's going to be the largest furniture warehouse and showroom in the state. And if you went out there today, I drove by it over the weekend, they're actually starting putting up some of the sides of the property. So the project is moving forward, and the applicant hopes to bring this small parcel in and incorporate that into their planned development zoning. These are the apartment complexes that are to the northwest of the site that I showed you on the aerial. And this is looking north on Sunken Road, basically standing at the affected property's edge. You can see that there's a privacy fence that separates this use from the man-made water feature to the east, and also you can see off in the distance some of the apartments. And this is looking south of Sunken Road. Again, predominantly along this roadway is single-family homes on large lots. Some of them are vacant. There are some limited agricultural uses. And then once you get to East Baker Street, you see some commercial and industrial activity. And this is South Frontage Road, which will be the primary access for this development. You can see South Frontage Road looking east, and then of course with that separator wall, I-4 is further north, and you can see the traffic traveling eastbound on that facility. Our staff did review this by the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan. The full goals, objectives, and policies are in your packet for your review. We do feel that it's consistent with those goals, objectives, and policies. And just to note that we looked at community development, enhanced hometown charm, which is predominantly related to its compliance with the Northeast Master Plan, future growth, dealing with annexations, growth management policies, provision of public facilities, and economic growth. And we felt that the applicant's request was consistent with that. We did have this reviewed by the Hillsborough County School District, even though we anticipate it will not be developed residentially. And they did indicate to us there is school capacity to serve this site. Transportation improvements through the city's zoning work will be coordinated with the Florida Department of Transportation in Hillsborough County. We did have discussions with their utilities department, and we understand that there's wastewater and water capacity to meet those uses that are proposed. The Hillsborough County noted it's within a water resource protection area, which I believe limits uses that do not adversely impact water quality, from activities such as leaching of stored materials. In this case, the proposed activity does not cause those issues to arise. And we also had it reviewed by the Environmental Protection Commission, which had no comment. With that, Planning Commission staff recommends the Pccpa 21-04 be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, and to forward this recommendation to the Plant City Commission. Chairman, with that, I conclude my presentation and stand for any questions. And I do want to note that, again, that the applicant does have a PowerPoint which they wish to share as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Would the applicant please go ahead?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Nicole Neugebauer, and I'm a land use attorney at Stearns Weber representing the applicant. My address is 401 East Jackson Street in Tampa, for the record. I have prepared a short presentation for you tonight, and I'd like to quickly go through that. It is very similar to Mark Hudson's presentation. The property is located in northeast Plant City, south of I-4 and east of Sunken Road. As Mark Hudson mentioned, it's about 8.89 acres. It is surrounded on 3 sides by the existing city furniture warehouse and showroom that was approved earlier this year through an annexation, comprehensive plan amendment, and rezoning. I know Commissioner Handy brought up the location of the larger warehouse in connection with this request, and if you look at the second graphic on the screen, it does show where this property is located in context with the larger city furniture project. The request before you today is to change the future land use category for that 0.89 acre parcel from Hillsborough County Residential 1 to Plant City Mixed Use Residential Commercial, and include the property in the I-4 Tech Corridor overlay. We have also submitted an annexation application and rezoning application concurrently with this request. This request is consistent with the Plant City Comprehensive Plan. We are adding this piece into the larger city furniture project in order to increase truck navigability and facilitate an easier truck turnaround in that corner. On the screen now is a current future land use map. As you can see, the property is currently in R1 in Hillsborough County. This is a proposed map. The blue square would then become the MURC future land use category if approved. And here's a map of the I-4 Tech Corridor overlay. We have no objections from any reviewing agencies, and Planning Commission staff did find this project consistent. The reason that this parcel was not added when the City Furniture went through this process earlier this year was because it was unavailable to City Furniture. With that, we respectfully request that you recommend approval to the Plant City Commission, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. All right. Was there anyone sign up for a public comment on this item?
No, sir.
Nope. All righty then. We will turn it over to the commissioners on this one for questions or comments, discussion. Oh. Not seeing any hands up. I will go ahead and close the public comment and open it up to motions from the commissioners. Commissioner Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we find that the proposed future land use designation in Plant City Pccpa 2104 to be found consistent with the imagined 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, and then forward that on.
Second.
I have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Dix, a second to that motion by Commissioner Powell. Is there any other discussion from the commissioners on this item? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Ernstine,
Yes.
Cardenas,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Dowdy,
Yes.
Kress,
Yes.
Marino,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 8-0.
Thank you. That was our only action item and only item in that meeting. So we'll thank you, Mr. Hudson. Thank you to the applicant, and we will adjourn that meeting and go quickly into our next public hearing, if you'll bear with me for a second. Welcome everybody to the September 14th, 2021 public hearings of the Planning Commission on City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendments. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation is encouraged. To minimize feedback in the audio, all participants in the meeting will be muted until it is their opportunity to speak. Planning commissioners should raise their hand or unmute themselves and turn on their camera to indicate that they would like to speak. Please be sure to state your name at the beginning of your remarks for the benefit of the clerk. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments. When your name is called, you will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments, and adhere to the time limits. If anyone has difficulties or is watching via HTV and would like to provide comments to be included in the record for the local government hearing, please email them to planner@plancom.org. That's planner@plancom.org. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chairman. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will then ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that, I would like to ask the clerk to please call roll.
Good evening. Bernstein,
Here.
Cardenas,
Here.
Dickerson,
Here.
Dick,
Here.
Dowdy,
Here.
Andy, Kress,
Here.
Lincoln, Marino,
Here.
Powell,
Here.
Rodriguez, here. Joseph,
Here.
thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, the first item we have up for action tonight is TACPA 2111, floor area ratio and for residential in community mixed use 35, community commercial 35, and urban mixed use 60. And the presenter will be Mr. David Hay.
Good evening, Commissioners. David Hay with your Comprehensive Plan and Policy Review Division. The next item before you is a recommendation on TACPA 2111. This amendment deals with changes in floor area ratio that can be utilized under the Community Mixed Use 35, the Community Commercial 35, and the Urban Mixed Use 60 future land use category. little background about the request. On April 1st of this year, Tampa City Council directed city staff to review the use of floor area ratio in determining maximum development potential for single-use structures. This ability to utilize FAR within the mixed-use categories has been an option within the comprehensive plan since at least the 1998 comprehensive plan. The purpose, as stated in the 1998 plan, was, quote, "This concept permits residential uses to be competitive with commercial and/or office uses," unquote. After a stakeholder meeting was held on May 25th, city staff revised the original draft language. Another stakeholder meeting was held on August 3rd. Now to go through the proposed changes. For reference, the proposed language is provided in your packet on page 12 and 13. The most significant change is the removal of utilizing FAR in determining maximum residential density in the South Tampa and New Tampa planning districts when developing single-use residential structures. Here we have the city's vision map. You can see the five planning districts within the city of Tampa. The South District is everything below this purple and green line. This all consists of the South Tampa Planning District, basically the Inner Bay Peninsula. The New Tampa Planning District is basically in this pink, kind of purplish pink color, north of USF. The remaining three, University, Central, and West Shore, as you can see, they contain all the urban villages and business centers. Based on the district's characteristics, the comprehensive plan, when has viewed these two districts, that's the South Tampa and New Tampa planning districts, as providing, quote, limited growth opportunities, unquote. Other changes within the land use descriptions include the removal of the statement, whichever calculation is more beneficial to the development, and the addition of, quote, determining a site's, unquote, to clarify an existing sentence within the land use description. And then finally, the word consistent is removed out of the land use description and replaced with compatible. The word consistent is not defined in the comprehensive plan. The definition of compatibility is defined in the comp plan as, quote, the characteristics of different uses or activities or design which allow them to be located near or adjacent to each other in harmony. Some elements affecting compatibility include the following: height, scale, mass and bulk of structures, pedestrian or vehicular traffic, circulation, access and parking impacts, landscaping, lighting, noise, odor, and architecture. Compatibility does not mean the same as, rather it refers to the sensitivity of development proposals in maintaining the character of existing development. Your planning commission staff has reviewed the proposed request and has identified some key aspects of the proposed change. One, the proposed language continues to promote a mixture of uses within the two planning districts. The majority of properties designated one of the three mixed-use flu categories are located along or within close proximity to major corridors. Vertical mixed-use structures within the two planning districts will continue to be eligible to use floor area ratio in determining overall residential unit count. Two, since under the proposed language, single-use residential developments would no longer be able to utilize floor area ratio in calculating residential density, it is staff's finding that there will be an overall reduction in residential units over what can currently be considered. Though overall unit count may be reduced, the size and cost of each unit may increase. The proposed language also is found to provide greater protection for single-family detached residential by potentially reducing building scale and massing. The language also clarifies that developments must be compatible, which is defined in the comprehensive plan. As always, we send this out to our partner agencies, and there were no objections noted from any of our reviewing agencies. It should also be noted that a large number of citizen comments have been received regarding this request, and they all can be accessed through the link that is provided in your packet. They've been updated as of this morning. The Planning Commission staff has reviewed the comprehensive plan and found that the proposed language to amend the Urban Mixed Use 60, the Community Commercial 35, and the Community Mixed Use 35 future land use categories to remove the option which has been deemed the FAR option for single-use residential projects in the South and New Tampa planning districts, consistent with the adopted policy guidance within the comprehensive plan. Your Planning Commission staff found three main areas of consistency. Adopted comp plan policies promote the preservation of neighborhood character. Policies also promote design sensitivity when developing adjacent to established single-family detached residential neighborhoods. The proposal clarifies the overall intent of the districts by providing that new development must be compatible with existing development. Also, overall scale and massing may be reduced. That's for new multifamily development. And that reduction in the massing, that's just one aspect of many regarding overall neighborhood character. Your Planning Commission staff also found the request consistent with the city's overall growth strategy. Described as the compact city form, these policies encourage the city to focus high-density housing in areas with access to transit and employment. Though some transit is provided in areas of South Tampa, there is no local transit service currently provided along West Shore Boulevard, except in Port Tampa City, or along Gandy Boulevard. These two corridors provide for a large percentage of the three land use categories found within the South Tampa Planning District. There is also no local transit service within the whole of the New Tampa Planning District. The majority of transit and employment in the city of Tampa are found within the Central, West Shore, and University Planning Districts. Both land use policies 9.4.1 and 9.6.2 encourage high-density multifamily residential development within areas with transit and employment availability. These policies also encourage multifamily development around recognized urban villages or business centers, which are all located within the Central Tampa, West Shore, and University planning districts. Based on these facts, your Planning Commission staff found the proposed language is consistent with the city's growth management strategy. Based on all that, those facts, Planning Commission staff does recommend to you this evening that the proposed text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. That concludes my presentation. Of course, I'm always available for questions. I believe Stephen Benson is in attendance from the city, and he has a presentation as well, and I believe also Randy Gores is in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Benson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen Benson, City of Tampa staff. We did want to provide you with some additional information in terms of how we reached this point in time. The proposed revisions to CPA 2111 have occurred over the last several months. As was mentioned by Planning Commission staff, several public information sessions were held, and we did make some modifications based upon that information. That had to do with the planning district geographic limitations, and we'd like to go over that with you briefly, as well as look at a little more detail at some of the affected parcels within those areas, and then just review the feedback that we received and how that was incorporated. So on the screen is the evolution of how this amendment has changed. The current comp plan language is on the left, and the draft language that was originally presented is in the middle. And then the current language that we are presenting today is on the right. This language is recent as of July 2021, so it's the language that was presented at the last public information session. I won't go into too much detail on this, but as David mentioned, we are proposing to limit the effects of this amendment to the New Tampa and the South Tampa planning districts. In the Imagine 2040 Comprehensive Plan introduction section, it does explain the unique visions for New Tampa and for the South Tampa planning districts. And that vision includes maintaining neighborhood stability, fostering compatible infill to promote mobility and sustainability, as well as achieving a more sustainable mix of uses and development, specifically in New Tampa. The South Tampa Planning District is limited to the areas south of Kennedy, west of Himes, south of Swan, and west of Howard. And then the New Tampa Planning District is essentially the district that is north of the USF area, the Claw Golf Course, and does include the Hidden River development area along Fletcher. The map on the screen shows you in the three different colors the parcels that this amendment would affect throughout the entire city. However, based upon the input that we received and the review of the existing comprehensive plan, as I mentioned, we are limiting to the areas and the two planning districts that were just mentioned. Looking more closely at those parcels specifically in the South Tampa Planning District, you can see here on the screen all of the parcels that are currently planned at UMU 60, CC 35, and CMU 35 in the South Tampa Planning District. And then on the screen are the lands here in the New Tampa Planning District that will be affected. There are no CMU or UMU parcels in the New Tampa Planning District, so what you see here are the lands that are planned at CC 35. Just some background on the residential unit growth since 2010. You can see here that New Tampa and Central Tampa were the areas that saw significant growth, as well as South Tampa. But the New Tampa Planning District in the blue versus the red, the growth that's occurred over the last 5 years is less than the growth that occurred 5 years prior. So the additional growth in New Tampa is tapering off. However, if you look at the South Tampa Planning District, the red versus the blue, the growth that occurred from 2010 to 2015 was less than the growth that occurred from 2015 to 2020. So this information is what we're using to take a look at whether or not this growth management tool has been effective in those areas. The bullets on the screen outline some of the comments and issues that were raised and that were addressed in the current language. The FAR option has been used by projects to generate significant infill in both low growth and high growth planning areas. The 10-year housing growth in South Tampa versus the citywide average was the second highest in the city. The FAR option is being used for single-use projects within the mixed-use future land use categories. In terms of housing affordability, limiting housing densities in new projects could potentially impact the housing issues that we're seeing right now. And then the term compatibility versus the term consistency, as well as the need to continue to promote mixed-use projects along our mixed-use corridors. As David mentioned, the term consistent is defined in the comprehensive plan of our land development code, and so we recommend replacing this with the term compatible, which is defined in the comp plan and land development code. And then again, one overview here, the two areas that are being affected are in pink and in yellow. The area in green will not be affected. So to summarize, we are limiting this amendment to CMU 35, CC 35, and UMU 60, future land use designations, and within the South Tampa Planning District and the New Tampa Planning District. No parcels within the Central Tampa Planning District, West Shore Planning District, or University Planning District will be affected by this amendment. And then no mixed-use projects anywhere in the city will be affected by this amendment. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available, as well as City Planning Director Randy Goers, to answer any of your questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Did we have, yeah, we had people sign up, so I'll let you take it away with that list.
Okay, sure. The first speaker is Carol Ann Bennett.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Carol Ann Bennett. I'm a lifelong resident of South Tampa. This is a very small change that applies only to the South Tampa and the New Tampa planning districts. This is because the comp plan states these districts are unsuited to urbanization and increased density. It states they should be stable and have the lowest amount of growth in the city. Some developers are grossly exaggerating the effects of this small step because they do not want to pay for bonus density. Developers must pay for bonus density, but FAR is free. FAR is a loophole that some developers are exploiting. How small is this change? Only a few very specific projects will be impacted. There are 5 things a developer must be doing in order to be affected by this change. 1, this change only applies to rezonings. If you don't need a rezoning, you're exempt. 2, it is only for single-use multifamily. If you're building mixed-use, you're exempt. 3, it is only for 3 land use categories. If you aren't building in one of those 3, you're exempt. 4, it is only for builders who are trying to use FAR to increase the density beyond what the requested zoning allows. If you are not using FAR, you're exempt. It is only for the South Tampa and New Tampa planning districts. If you're building outside of those districts, you are exempt. A developer must want all 5 of those things before they are impacted. If they are only doing 4 of them, this will not apply to them. The city staff, some of whom wrote the current language, say FAR was never meant for residential, and the comp plan needs to be changed because FAR and bonus density are not being used as intended. In reality, partially eliminating FAR does not do nearly enough. It does not stop the mega apartment complexes. In fact, several of the most recent rezonings south of Gandy, we call it SOG, that resulted in big multifamily complexes did not even use FAR. Developers can still apply for excessive density when they apply for rezoning by using bonus density instead of FAR. This amendment does not do enough, but at least it is a first step in the right direction, so we are asking you to find this consistent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Next up.
Stephanie Pointer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephanie Pointer. I'm the president of the Tampa Homeowners Association of Neighborhoods. I am not speaking tonight in that capacity, but as a resident of South of Gandy, also known as SOG, in South Tampa. I'd like to add that I'm not being paid for speaking tonight. I have no interest other than that of my neighbors. Many who have reached out via email to Mr. Hay to be on the record that they are against multifamily being added, let alone using the FAR to increase the dwelling units further in our neighborhoods. I am not going to read the comprehensive plan of 2040 to you, but I'd like to point out that on page 14, both New Tampa and South Tampa are captured as traditionally single family that would not be compromised, but that should not be compromised by increased urbanization and defined as areas of stability. I'd offer that stability has been thrown out the window. Since I have never been before the commission previously, I'd like to point out some facts about SOG. Since 2016, when the comp plan was written, South of Gandy, west of Dale Mabry, has built, are building, or permitted to be built 4,877 apartments, not condos, not townhouses, but apartments, in our little 4 square mile part of the world. According to the tax assessor's office, we have approximately 4,350 single family homes in our area. No, please, that means that our community will end up with 527 more apartments than we have single family homes in our area. September 8th, Times had an article about rental prices, and they quoted CoStar Group that 5,500 apartments were added to the market this year. My numbers show that in SOG, not South Tampa, but SOG, 1,029 of those units were in our area. That's nearly 19%. Remember, we aren't supposed to be urbanized and we are not supposed to have growth. The same article stated that 7,800 are under construction. 1,629 of those are slated for south of Candy. That's 20%. I won't mention the additional 620 that are in flux for some reason or another in the system right now. None, I repeat, none of any of those nearly 5,000 units is considered to be affordable housing or even close to it. Please know that not only do we have a population well over projections in our dead end, but we also have an economic engine that is of strategic importance that employs 22,000 people. There are heavy industrial facilities in SOG. There are national security concerns. I won't even talk about hurricane evacuations because that's a given. FAR reduction is only following the comprehensive plan for our community. SOG folks didn't write it. Please, I respectfully ask you to push this legislation forward to protect our community. We have enough growth without this excess. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone 3 minutes per person. So next up.
Jean Strohmeyer.
Hello? Oops.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can't see my video. Is it working? Oh, hi. Hi, my name is Jean Strohmeyer. I am the president of Inner Bay, south of Gandy Neighborhood Association.
Did you sign in?
Hello? That's weird. I've been listening to everybody and listening to this. Listen, we have been for 2 years in front of City Council trying to limit the overbuilding down here south of Gandy. We're on a dead end. We're in a peninsula. There was expected to be the 100-year flood. I think we might have had it today, but just due to the rain we just had. But in an evacuation event, we can't get out of here. Even though this small change to FAR is not going to really make a difference, as Carol Ann had stated. It really didn't help. It wouldn't have helped 3 mega apartment complex coming down into the peninsula, thereby doubling our single-family population to apartments. We were supposed to be an area of stability. That has gone to the wayside. We just need this little small step for our neighborhood. All we're doing is trying to make sure, number one, that we can get out here safely, which I don't even think we're going to be able to do in case we have a storm surge. We have one way out, and this is the first you guys are hearing of it, but we are on a dead end. We have MacDill Air Force Base that would have to evacuate thousands and thousands of people in an event. After 9/11, the real one, when 9/11 happened, we were stuck. We were stuck, and that didn't even happen here. So any national security event, we're stuck here. So any increase in population and density due to FAR is going to be met with it'll be a bad idea. And our city council, they know that, and so we just ask that you just eliminate this small portion, and it helps us a little, not nearly enough, but it'll help a little bit, and we appreciate your time. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cynthia Spidell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Spidell. I'm Associate Director of Planning at Stearns Weaver. I'm an AICP certified planner with over 16 years of planning experience, and it is my planning opinion that the proposed change is inconsistent with the comp plan and the very policies quoted in the staff report. It is counterintuitive to key urban design principles, namely walkability and the provision of diverse housing options. The staff report even acknowledges that a consequence of the amendment will be larger units. And as we all know, larger units are more expensive than smaller units and thus less affordable. The staff report also specifically calls out Rattlesnake Point, which in itself is also a peninsula and in transition with unique geographic features. The multifamily developers, or any proposed multifamily developers on Rattlesnake Point, they should be able to design their structures in mass and scale with each other and not with residential communities miles away. Additionally, applicable, compatible nearby development to Rattlesnake Point and mass and scale that could apply are West Shore Marina District and the West Shore Yacht Club. And as you can see from the West Shore Yacht Club, they have 15-floor, 180-foot condo high-rises adjacent to single-family residential, and it works and it's successful. Therefore, in conclusion, I ask that the Planning Commission find the proposed amendment inconsistent with the applicable provisions of the comprehensive plan and deny the amendment, and thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob Kramer.
Hi, this is Jake. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Jake Kramer. I'm a land use attorney. I'm actually calling today as a resident of the South Tampa Planning District, though. This is the first broad-scale down planning exercise that, frankly, that I've ever seen within the city of Tampa. The backup to this amendment essentially finds that the city's comp plan directs growth away from South Tampa and New Tampa. But that's not a fair reading of the comp plan. It doesn't say that. Policy 1.1.8 actually says that New Tampa and South Tampa must be served by transit. That's a city responsibility. It doesn't matter that the city has not fulfilled that obligation. So the way that you provide transit is that you increase density within transit corridors that get identified through a planning process. That's in fact been done. And all of these comprehensive plan categories make up those transit, those future areas for transit. So we're going to remove density from the areas that the city has already targeted as being in need of transit. I'm also concerned that staff didn't address either housing affordability or housing equity. HSG objectives 1.1 and 1.2 require the city to look at providing fair housing across the city, and South Tampa and New Tampa are not excluded from that. So from a planning equity perspective, this is really the type of bad planning that has led to relatively segregated communities in the past. What this is going to do is direct growth away from the city's richest and widest areas and place it in the city's minority communities, and that's not fair. Because of that, I have some concerns about whether the proposal might violate the Fair Housing Act. So I think the city needs to take another look at this, and I would respectfully ask that you vote it as inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sean Brown.
Yes, this is Sean Brown. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Brown. I am a born and raised resident here in Tampa, and also president of the Gandy Civic Association, although I'm not going to speak in that capacity this evening. Speaking as a resident of Tampa, and in particular South Tampa, all my life. The fact is, as has been mentioned, floor area ratio and what is being proposed is truly a small change in the comprehensive plan amongst the overall goal. As Stephen Benson pointed out in one of the slides, South Tampa, in particular along Gandy, there's a lot of these three residential zones that are slated that this would impact. However, again, what needs to be emphasized in this is that if someone comes in and proposes a mixed-use type of development, floor area ratio can still be used. And that is something where there's nothing wrong with that in some respects. Mixed use having an opportunity to create jobs and diversity with livable, walkable communities is not such a bad thing. Gandy Boulevard right now does not have a park bus line going along it, even though it's identified in the comprehensive plan as a transit corridor. Dale Mabry, south of Gandy, does not have a HART bus line that serves local. It just serves express. The fact is that to create a transit corridor, you need some mixed use. That is right now does not exist. Now, I understand one comment was made that it's the city of Tampa's responsibility. But as we all know, the HART bus line is controlled by a different governing agency. So that's a little bit difficult to try to navigate on all sides because it all comes down to money. The fact is, we need to look at this from a bigger perspective. Having more residential units is one thing, but not having opportunity to create jobs and a livable, walkable space when that is sorely needed in communities nowadays is another. Big monster projects that just focus on residential is not the answer. Now, we also look at pricing. A lot of studies have come out recently saying that Tampa, in particular, rent has increased between 18 and 22% since January of this year. I think many folks you can ask would say that their for wherever they work has not increased that by that much to compensate for that level of increase. Now, if someone wants to live in a walkable community that has mixed use in it, you know, they may be able to get a job that otherwise they would have to spend gas money on to go to and from work or even have a car. There are many things we can look at with this. This is just one small change to try to make Tampa in certain areas walkable and livable.
Thank you.
The last speaker is Jennifer Motzinger.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Motzinger, and I'm representing the Tampa Bay Builders Association, the people who build the American dream of homeownership. I do have strong concerns about the proposal before you this evening because it does threaten housing affordability. And it does seem like more housing price increases, and that's 30% so far this year, the more restrictions on development regulations to build housing supply. This proposal exacerbates the crisis we are in, and it affects all of us, some who get priced out of the market and others with higher property taxes. And in the planning world, compatibility typically works against areas ripe for redevelopment as it means change. And a good example of that is the redevelopment that's gone on right here in downtown. A lot of investment went into changes we see today, but not sure that would be possible because right now, compatibility, there's a lot of difference between compatibility and what we have today. And I doubt anybody would disagree that we still don't have transit downtown. Well, not yet anyway. An important element that was not addressed in what I read in the staff findings was the fact that the use of FARs drives down the cost per unit by allowing greater density. This in turn allows for lower cost housing. I don't feel it's relevant to debate the difference between market rate, low cost, or affordable housing. These terms have been basically rendered meaningless because of the extremes in land costs, building materials, labor availability, and that has all dramatically affected every element of housing. In my opinion, the removal of the FAR is counterproductive to the well-considered and placed developments being proposed in those areas and does nothing to address the infrastructure improvements in the areas that deserve to be kept up with growth in those areas. It does not send a good message. It actually sends a message to everybody that the city is not interested in transit-oriented development. It's not interested in density, and it's certainly not interested in housing for all. Sadly, we are following the example cities where people are fleeing right now because they can no longer afford to live there. Please consider these long-term effects in your decisions tonight. Remember that you are the independent professional body that plans for the 25-year horizon. Just ask yourself if this density is not going to go here, where will it go? Because it's not going to go to Brandon, and it's not going to go to Riverview, and it's certainly not going to be here in Tampa. Thank you, and I respectfully request that you find this inconsistent with your comp plan. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you.
But before you move to board discussion, I think the city had a couple of additional comments as the applicant.
Well, yeah, I was going to give him a chance to rebut.
Sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Benson or Mr. Goers?
Hello, Commissioners. Randy Goers. I'll just be brief. I think Stephen may have a couple of extra comments to add as well.
Okay.
I'm Director of City Planning, and there's been a lot of debate on the use of FAR for single-use projects. We believe that it's not going to impact the amount of housing that is going to occur in the city at all. It's going to affect the amount of housing that's going to occur on specific parcels in 2 districts in the city. The entire, the central planning district is huge. It needs housing. Single-use residential projects are more than welcome there. We invite all the developers to locate them there and help build up the density that we need. I think what we'll see in the South Tampa and the New Tampa districts are more mixed-use projects, because mixed-use projects can still use FAR, and if you get an apartment building with 300 units in it, that's about 400 or 500 people. They're going to need a restaurant, coffee, places to go, and that's the kind of projects that our plan is looking to create throughout the city. So this isn't going to have a negative effect. It's only going to affect certain parcels and certain property owners and interests that want to build single-use residential projects, because it's easy right now, and that's where the demand is. So I think maybe the option they have is they can always request a plan amendment to increase the density to allow them to build the number of units that they're looking for. So there are no negatives to the project, other than, again, to a few parcels or specific parcels that have an intent to construct that residential only in those areas of the city. I'll defer to Stephen for any other comments he may have on his presentation.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to add there was a comment about the bonus density program, and our bonus density provision caps the bonus at an additional 5 units per acre, whereas the FAR option does not have a cap, theoretical cap, in the amount of additional units that can be provided. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, I will turn it over to the commissioners for discussion, comments, questions on this item. Not seeing any lights in the room or any hands being raised online. Commissioner Marino, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. First of all, I want to thank all the folks in the community who have been working on this, and then obviously city staff for working and their outreach to them and making sure their concerns were heard. I think going back to the slide that shows where development is occurring and the percentages, if this is to go forward tonight, there needs to be a carrot and stick approach, in my opinion. We're going to have to incentivize development in Central City, West Shore, and the university, because clearly development is happening in South Tampa and New Tampa because you could afford to charge higher rent, higher prices, because those places are in demand. There's a lot of tools at the city's disposal to encourage further development in those 3 core districts. And, it's an interesting step to take this, to go forward like this. There are parcels along the CSX line, South Tampa, that would be impacted. There are parcels in the transit corridor along Bruce B. Downs that would be impacted. There's definitely a case to be made that those places are overdeveloped, but if those places are overdeveloped, then the core is underdeveloped. And we need to make sure that we're encouraging that development in the core. So hopefully we'll take this step tonight, and then the next step is to further encourage core, development in those 3 core districts.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Are there any more comments? Commissioner Powell, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that sort of concerns me, I've heard from some of the public comment, and I think it was mentioned by 2 or 3 different people, that in particular for those that are in the south of Gandy, that that area was supposed to be an area of stability. And I don't know why that just sort of resonated with me, and I'm not really sure what that really means, because it seems like this is more a referendum on attack of people who are renting, and where I'm coming from, or just like where I'm seeing it. And I'd love for someone to try to, show me something otherwise, but it seems like this is, we're saying that we don't want to have, people renting in, this, particular area because we want to have homes. And, a lot of times, in my business, I do a lot of property management, and I have seen, numerous families, who have, gone through life transitions, whether it be good or bad. But most of the time, a lot of times it's bad, people going through divorce, becoming single dads, single moms, and, they have to go into an apartment. And they want to go into an area, that is, safe. And so I often find that, apartments, they can provide that sort of stability. And it also brings like a sense of comfort knowing that they can continue to maybe be in the same area. They just can no longer be, in the same, home. It keeps kids, maybe in the same school district and, with their friends. So while I understand and I hear, the complaints, I think some of this sort of started out because of the infrastructure problems that were in south of Gandy, and and then all of a sudden there's just a flooding of people that have been down there, and maybe that's exacerbated some of the transportation issues that have been there. But from where my personal experience and what I've seen, I do often find that apartments can provide that, and this body, someone brought up, I don't know who it was, made a good point that we are looking at the 2040 horizon, and we are trying to figure out how we're going to put 600,000 plus people in this county somewhere, and we're removing density from where people want to be, and we're trying to tell them we want you to go where you don't want to go right now. And by the way, you can't go into South County because it's not open for business. Now downtown is no longer open for business, but you're welcome to go over here. So it's sort of I know you can plan for we're supposed to plan for growth, but it's almost like we want to steer them into just one specific area. This is where we want you all now, and it almost borders on, I wouldn't say like anti-Semitism towards like renters, but that's what it feels like to me. And I just wanted to speak up for that particular group of people. I don't think that that's necessarily fair and equitable for them. So I'd like to hear some other thoughts, but that's where my head's at.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Was there any response to that from the applicant or from staff? Was there any? Yeah.
Sure. I just wanted to make clear that the land use categories of CMU 35, CC 35, and UMU 60 will continue to allow 35 or 60 units per acre, and that's definitely going to be a multifamily product. So, so it is not as if there will not be apartments in South Tampa or New Tampa. What is being removed is the ability for them to use the floor area ratio instead of the density if they don't do mixed use. So that if a project wanted to, in those areas, wanted to avail themselves of using the floor area ratio, which might allow them to build the same size box, but cut it up into 40 units or 45 units per acre, they would have to have a mixed use component on the ground floor or something like that. So there still is a path for that product to occur. And I want to be clear that we certainly would not support something that stripped multifamily from those areas, because we certainly think that a mix of residential products is needed in all parts of the city.
And I do hear you, but I think that just from a little research I've been able to do, I mean, obviously developers are wanting to use the floor area ratio because then that does give them an opportunity for better density, which means that maybe they're probably going to be able to do, let's just call an even number, 20% less. So therefore they can't do as many, which is going to mean in order to make the project viable, rents are going to have to be higher, or prices are going to be higher. So the affordability factor isn't going to be there. But what I was actually more pointing towards is the sentiment that I hear and what I feel is directed at a group of people, particularly those that are renters, and there seems to be like there is a disdain, like we don't want you renters in our area, get out. Like, and
That's not true.
That's what I feel like I hear.
No.
And what I see. And so it's just something that I wanted to bring up because I've heard it, multiple times. And when I keep hearing the term area of stability from those in the public comments, that's the impression, that I got. And that's sort of the sentiment that I've been watching this movement, what I've seen, in my personal opinion, for the last couple of years, and I just don't want that to continue to be perpetuated, because there are wonderful people who are renters, and I can give story after story about people who have actually rented with us, who started off being in a single parent home, who then transitioned into college, who then transitioned into young professionals, who have now raising their own families in an apartment community. So I just I don't want there to be a disdain towards people who do rent, because they are good people as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. All right, Commissioner Cardenas, please.
So it's interesting. I think part of the problem that we come across often in this board is what we do is kind of difficult to understand and difficult to explain to people. It took me some time sitting on this board to really understand what we do. And, I think our local citizens, come on and give us their public comment and think that maybe we have more powers than what we do. And sometimes some of these things are so complicated, it's difficult to understand. And I think a lot of the public comment that we get is really just a cry from the public saying, hey, do something with our infrastructure. Give us some roads where we can fit cars, where people can get in and get out, and all of these different things. It's not targeted towards a specific class of people, or targeted towards renters or owners or whatever it is. It's people that actually live down there, that drive on the roads, that see what happens when it floods, and they see what happens when you put a huge community next to another community, and now those people are getting flooded out even a little bit more when it rains, because before that big building was there, they didn't have the water coming up to their doorstep, and now they do. So I think what the people are really looking for and asking for in what they say is, hey, fix our roads, make some changes. That's about it.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardenas. Good points. Yes, Commissioner Kress.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I've been kind of loosely paying attention to this, and I agree. This is all about Marion land use and transportation, and even though we don't have a bus line on Gandy right now, I hope everybody who complained tonight will vote for the next referendum to get us some more local money so we can do things like that. To me, as a planner, I don't love all of this, but as a compromise in a growing city that's kind of busting at the seams and doesn't have the infrastructure in place, this feels like a pretty fair compromise to me.
Thank you, Commissioner Kress. Yes, Commissioner Bernstein.
Yeah, I'm really sure the views of Commissioner Kress in that regard, and I think she took the words right out of my mouth. Sometimes perfection is the enemy of the good, and I wish we had a perfect solution in front of us to vote on. I don't know if this fits that bill, but it may be a path to get there. And I also would add that, to the point that Commissioner Marino made, I wish we had an opportunity in front of us to vote on something broader that included the incentives Commissioner Marino was talking about, so we could drive more balance of investment in other parts of the city that clearly need it. But that's not in front of us today. I don't know if there's a way to send that signal to the City Council in the event that an element of this moves forward to them, but hopefully, at a minimum, they'll see these minutes and understand that there's a broader objective here beyond just what's in front of us to vote on today.
Thank you. Good comments. Was there any more comments from the commissioners, discussion on this item? I see no hands on the line, no lights in the room, so I will go on ahead and close the public comment on this item and open it up for motions on this item from the commissioners. Commissioner Bernstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, I would move that we vote in favor of finding TA/CPA 21-11 consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the Imagine 2040 Tampa comprehensive plan and that we pass it on to the city council for consideration.
Some motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Bernstein. Do I hear a second, Commissioner Kress?
I'll second that,
All
Commissioner
right.
Kress.
And a second to that consistency finding by Commissioner Kress. Is there any more discussion on this item from the commissioners? Not seeing any, I will ask the clerk to go ahead and do a roll call vote on this item.
Bernstein?
Yes.
Cardenas?
Yes.
Dix? Commissioner Dix? Dowdy?
Yes.
Kress?
Yes.
Marino?
Yes.
Powell?
No.
Joseph?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carried 6-1. Commissioner Powell voted no.
Commissioner Joseph, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Maybe to Melissa. I've heard a lot about consistency versus compatible, and I just wondered if it makes sense for us to be voting whether something is compatible with the comprehensive plan rather than consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I'll just throw that out there. You don't have to answer it right now, but maybe just something to think about.
I believe the term in statute is that it's supposed to be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
And it's defined.
It should be consistency for purposes of the proposed change to the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we have it defined anywhere other than the dictionary, but since it's not defined in the comprehensive plans, it might be defined in the statute, though. I can look that up and find out.
I was
It's a
just
good
throwing it
question.
out as it just kind of came to me as a question, like make sure we're being consistent with our terminology.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. On to our next, thank you for the presentation, all the public comment, everybody who gave their time for the last one. And on to our next action item is 2B, TACPA 2113. It is also, it's a comprehensive plan amendment, 3541 North Boulevard, and the presenter is Jennifer Malone.
Hi, Commissioners. Jennifer Malone here with your Planning Commission staff. Hopefully you can hear me, and see my screen. So I'm here to present on map amendment 2113 at 3541 North Boulevard. This is located in the Central Tampa Planning District, the Tampa Heights Urban Village, and the Tampa Heights neighborhood. It is a privately initiated request, small scale at about 1.56 acres, and the request before you today is from public, semi-public to residential 10. I have an aerial of the subject site. It is outlined in the pink purple color. I'm going to note that North Boulevard is kind of the dividing line in the area. So everything to the east of North Boulevard, the subject site included, is located in Tampa Heights, the Tampa Heights Urban Village and the Tampa Heights neighborhood. Everything to the west of North Boulevard is located in Riverside Heights and is not included in the urban village. To the north of the site, you can see the Calvin Taylor Park. Not sure if my cursor is showing up, but that's to the north. To the south of the site, it's out of frame, but there's the Plymouth Playground. The yellow star to the north of the subject site represents the other parcel of the Showman's Cemetery. So the Showman's Cemetery are two parcels, the yellow star to the north, and then the subject site itself today. The blue parcel to the east is the Jewish Cemetery. The purple star to the south is a place of religious assembly which has been developed at the corner of West Plymouth Street and North Boulevard. Everything else in the surrounding area is the Woodlawn Cemetery owned by the City of Tampa, but those three stars are not owned by the City of Tampa. So I just wanted to make that very clear that there's some different ownership in this area, including that place of religious assembly to the south with the purple star, which has been developed. There's a building on it just right there to the south. So I have some site pictures. This is a portion of the Showman's Rest Cemetery along North Boulevard. I'm just going to make sure state it again, this is not included in the request. We actually go back to the aerial. You can see that the buildings have been cut out of the request. So the mausoleum here and then to the, is not within the request. So this is just for us surrounding pictures of the area. Here's another mausoleum that's not in the request, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's around it. This is the subject site facing east. That is part of the request. When I took this picture, the subject site was behind me, and I'm looking straight ahead at the intersection of West Ohio Avenue and North Boulevard, facing west into the Riverside Heights neighborhood. And this picture, I'm looking south along North Boulevard. See those single-family houses. And here we have the adopted future land use map. Again, I put stars on those parcels on the adopted future land use map so you can see that those are the ones that are not owned by the city of Tampa. To the north of the subject site in the green is Calvin Taylor Park. The green to the south of the site is the Plymouth Playground. The subject site has an adopted future land use of public, semi-public. And then there's residential 10 in the surrounding area. That's a lot of the single family detached neighborhood that you've seen. Further to the north is West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and we have community mixed use 35 along that corridor, which allows for those commercial uses. I'll also point out this light pink color, suburban mixed use 6 to the south allows some neighborhood office uses. So that's what this is. And the proposal today would take this item, this subject site to the residential 10 future land use designation. The public, semi-public future land use category does not have a maximum of density or intensity defined. It is determined by the surrounding area. Through this plan amendment, there would be potential for about 15 dwelling units and approximately 23,000 square feet of non-residential uses. However, all those non-residential uses will be required to meet commercial locational criteria per the residential 10 future land use designation. I have some more background to go over on this request. This has been in ownership by the Showman's Association since 1971. That was when the property appraiser records show that that ownership had changed. I'm sure that the applicant will elaborate on that. I went back to the preliminary subsector plan in 1975, and I saw that this was public, semi-public future land use back then. So what this is falling under is the cemetery operating as one of the quasi-public use, even though it was in private ownership. So to allow a parcel to be designated as public, semi-public, but not operating outside of the public use, the comprehensive plan states that the affected property shall be the subject of a plan amendment to determine the appropriate regulatory land use designation for said parcel. So the residential 10 future land use is going to provide that appropriate regulatory land use designation. It would allow consideration of development that cannot be considered under the adopted public, semi-public designation. The applicant has provided a final report geophysical investigation Sherman's Rest site, which is included in your packet, and it states that no objects as would be associated with buried graves were encountered on the 12 test locations performed at the project site. I will note that the further field testing or preservation of any burial sites would need to be accomplished through the rezoning or the building permit process. The staff found this consistent with the comprehensive plan. Additional infill housing opportunities compatible with the surrounding development is always encouraged by the comprehensive plan. So as you saw, there's already residential 10 within the surrounding area, and this is going to provide development at a similar density to the surrounding area. We also found that it's consistent with their urban village policies that do seek to allow a greater share of growth while balancing the scale and development of the surrounding community. And this would provide additional land for future population growth while protecting the character and maintaining the existing density of the surrounding single-family area. So with that, we found it consistent. The City of Tampa staff, I believe, is on the line, but they also had no objection to this request. And with that, unless the City of Tampa has comments, I will turn it over to the applicant. Or I can also answer any questions.
Thank you. Will the applicant,
thanks.
please? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Chair. Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here with Steve Ashkenazi who is the applicant for this comp plan amendment. Also on the line is Mike Whitman with GeoView, who can talk a little bit about the ground penetrating radar study that was accomplished. If I could share my screen. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, obviously just a quick rehash. This is the area we're talking about. The area to the north that's not included where you can see my cursor, that is also part of the same address. It's part of the same folio, and that northern part, unlike the portion of the site that's actually in the red box, that portion outside the red box is a portion of the cemetery. And as I'm going to talk about a little bit in the next slide, there is a fair amount, I think, of confusion and understandable, I think, misconception about this specific piece of property we're talking about this evening, based on the review of the commissioner briefing, as well as some of the comment that's come in. So let's talk about a few things that this situation is not. This is not public property. I think there's been some confusion that this land is owned by the city of Tampa, that this is Woodlawn Cemetery. It is not. It is not public property, yet it does have a public future land use associated with it, which is a problem that we're trying to resolve. This parcel is also not a cemetery. It is a surplus portion of land that has been owned by the Showman's Rest for some time, as Jennifer alluded to, but it has been undeveloped, and as Mike will talk about in a little bit, there's no evidence that this was ever used for a cemetery. There are no structures on the site. It's not used to support Showman's Rest in any way. It's not used for a public purpose, and that's really the reason we're here this evening, and for a very specific reason, is the public, semi-public future land use that's attached to this parcel is entirely inappropriate, given that it is not used for any public purpose at all, nor is it used for any cemetery use that could be described as semi-public. I think I touched on this a little bit. Number 4, there are no structures on this. I think sometimes with some of the squares, in maybe like an earlier iteration of the staff report, and maybe even some of the documentation we've put in didn't necessarily show that notch out. But as Jennifer alluded to, there are no structures on the parcel we're talking about this evening. 5 might be the most important, I think, based on some of the public comments, and certainly for folks who are watching this, that this is not a rezoning. There is no development proposal pending here at all. The sole question really before you commissioners this evening is whether public, semi-public future land use is appropriate for a private undeveloped piece of property that the property owner seeks to sell and to no longer own. And another misconception too, I saw this in the public comment, this concern about 30-something units being developed based on the R10, which staff found consistent, and which is the overwhelming future land use category across the street. 15 units would be the maximum development. So just a quick rehash that so you see where we are. Staff found this consistent. I'm going to get through this quickly because it's been a bit of a long evening, I know, for you guys, and I'm sure there's some questions. Before and after is pretty clear. We're not proposing any drastic change relative to what is in the proximity, and that was intentional on the applicant's part to try to make this compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, which is on screen. Again, if you look into the future land use matrix of the comprehensive plan, where it actually bullets out what is a typical use for public, semi-public, none of these things apply. Perhaps the last bullet, other compatible public, quasi-public, and special uses would apply if this land was a cemetery, but this land is not a cemetery. This land is next to a cemetery, and as I'll show in the next slides, that is a fairly common coincidence, particularly among some of the larger places of rest in the city. Before I do that, turn to the other cemetery examples there, I'd like to turn to Mike real quick. Mike, if you could address some of what you found from the GPR study, that'd be great.
Sure. We actually did 2 investigations of the site. First was in 2019, and then the second was in 2020. The purpose.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry, Mike Whiteman, and I'm president of GeoView, and I was also the project manager for this investigation.
Thank you.
In the 2019 study, we addressed the entire property using two different geophysical methods. One was ground penetrating radar and the other was a metal detection technology. The study was designed to go through and identify any potential burials within that property. What we did find with the investigation was no indication of graves, but that there did appear to be a large number of isolated single objects which were attributing most likely to buried debris or even old tree stumps. The purpose of the 2020 investigation was to do a physical confirmation of those identified features to see if for some reason possibly they were a grave and we just didn't see them in the superficial geophysical testing that we did. So in that secondary study, we selected 12 representative locations and we went through and relocated them with the ground penetrating radar and then did hand probing and hand augering, in which we were able to go through and sample and probe the soil to a depth of about 6 to 7 feet. If a grave or a casket had been present, we would have gone through and identified it within that depth range. Typically on cemetery studies, we'll identify either a change in soil type and density or encounter the actual casket at a depth of about 4 feet. So by going down to 6 to 7 feet, I think we were pretty much able to confirm and doing a very good representative sampling of the features that we did find that graves were not present on the property.
Tyler, I think you're on mute.
I'm very much on mute. Sorry about that. So to put a point on what Mike was saying, as to the third bullet on screen, where we are this evening is at a very preliminary process. We are asking you as the commissioners to find consistent our request to change the comprehensive plan future land use map element designation for this property from public, semi-public to R10. From there, it's going to go to City Council, and from there will have to be some measure of zoning conformance for whatever is going to be built on this property. And that third bullet, I think, is very important in that through the rezoning that will eventually have to happen, through the building permit process, there very likely will be additional investigations that are required, which the property owner is absolutely going to comply with. So I think it's important to stress that, because a little bit of the tenor of the public comment was, tonight you guys are going to decide whether 35 townhomes get built. That's absolutely not the case at all. So just for a little bit of precedent, if you think to Garden Memories or Myrtle Hill, as I'll show in the next slide, at some point cemeteries do end, and you do the best you can to find what is an appropriate transition. But at both Garden of Memories and in Myrtle Hill, there are elements of residual buffered non-cemetery development of some non-cemetery use, and that's really exactly what we're asking to move forward in whatever capacity comes up in the rezoning. But at the end of the day, this is private land. It is not used for any public purpose at all, yet it still retains this vestige of perhaps the original city ownership of the property and the public, semi-public use, which we don't think is consistent with what the property is currently being used for and would be used for in the future. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and really appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right. Did we have sign-ups for this one? Okay.
We did. The first speaker is Joyce Rumfola.
All right. Now, I just want to remind everyone, 3 minutes apiece.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I've been a resident of Riverside Heights for 20 years. I live on Westwood Lawn Avenue. I've witnessed this neighborhood go from Tampa's little secret, tucked in a little nook by the river, to Tampa's hot spot. With every new home that goes up, which is likely around 100 in the past few years, there's large, beautiful oaks that are cut down. Lots have been split and reconfigured, and more people have moved in, and it's more dense. And through all this, I've been okay. I'm actually not opposed to change. but constructing townhomes in the middle of a passive green space, a green space which neighbors refer to as, oh, it's a little oasis over here, I think it's wrong, and I say no. The applicant has plucked a green space that does not border any residential property to the east, north, and the south. The property's always been respected as part of the cemetery. In the proposal, this area is being referred to as part of the future Tampa Heights urban village. Well, this specific property does not contribute any benefit to Tampa Heights. Conversely, this proposal greatly negatively impacts Riverside Heights. On page 36, where the development trends are listed, all of the listed future townhomes and townhomes under construction occur along Boulevard on the south end, but they also have east and west streets, which will aid in the traffic circulation. The proposed site does not have this luxury. It is one way in and out unless they do some sort of two-way drive, and then it's two drives added. The other thing to consider, developers do fulfill the city parking requirement. But there is always a need for more parking, the guest parking, the extra car the family has. Where are they going to go? I can see them landing on the ends of Woodlawn and Ohio. The traffic will be greatly impacted already. North Boulevard is a steady stream of vehicles during peak drive times and for all events. The events are at Armature Works, Julian B. Lane, and even the stadium impact the traffic and the ability for Riverside Heights residents to leave the neighborhood. Each morning, I wait behind a few vehicles as I leave my home on Woodlawn and try to get out onto Boulevard. I can only imagine that this will be much worse with the townhomes at the end of the street. Let's see, an additional thing, the townhomes that were listed to the south will improve that area. These proposed townhomes will not improve our area. It will impact it. The north area of Riverside Heights is all brick streets. Yes.
You have 3 minutes. Your 3 minutes is up. Would you mind wrapping up your comments and ending, please?
One more minute. The north side of Riverside Heights is brick streets, single family, and all along Boulevard it's single family. The south, where other townhomes have been built, it's actually improved it. It's not brick streets and it's commercial along Boulevard. I don't think that this is suitable. I actually have a bunch more comments, but thanks for the time.
Thank you. HTV?
Yes.
If someone refuses to finish their comments, I would ask you to dump them. I've tried to mute people from here, and I have no control for some reason. So could you please make sure that that doesn't happen again for me?
Yes, we could cut them off at 3 minutes.
Thank you. All right, let's keep going.
Ari Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Members of the Commission, my name's Ari Fitzgerald and I live in Riverside Heights within sight of any proposed development that might occur on the subject parcel. I moved to Riverside Heights from South Tampa and I love it there. I'm here in hopes of persuading you to help protect what makes it so desirable. The applicant's presentation was certainly helpful, and I'm not opposed to changing the designation from its current public form, but I would oppose any designation that would be a significant density increase from its current state, because despite its current public designation, it is vacant. I understand the need for infill in urban areas to prevent urban sprawl, but there's a tolerance limit, and we are there in this area. Multifamily residential is ill-advised here. It's incompatible with the surrounding development, which is all single-family residential and cemeteries. Homes in the area are on smaller lots, but residents aren't right on top of each other. Other townhomes built in the area, to me, look out of place and are ruining the character of this old area. They look like they just popped up. I would rather see this parcel to remain undeveloped, particularly considering Tampa's history with paving over cemeteries. Maintaining green space has several benefits. It really is an oasis, as Joyce said. People enjoy walking in the current quiet, contemplative setting, and I'm concerned that it will impact existing grand trees. There's a lot of wildlife living there, including songbirds, hawks, herons, egrets, bats, and coyotes, and most residents care about the wildlife. Their presence is a sign of the environmental health of the area. Townhomes would upset the balance and would negatively impact the health of the environment and its residents. Then there's the drainage issue, and this is really important. While infill is desirable in urban areas, there's a limit to how much pavement a rain-soaked area like Tampa can handle. Drainage is already terrible in this area, and standing water and the bugs they bring linger on streets for days after a single heavy rain, and for weeks when there's a rainy pattern. Puddles are there for so long you can see tadpoles swimming in them, and they won't go away until there's a week or more with no rain. This phenomenon is bad enough on Indiana Avenue, but it's worse on streets to the south. If you pave over this considerable green space, you can expect more runoff into the surrounding areas, and this is unfair to residents. I ask that you not develop this small parcel, leave it green, don't create more runoff. However, if development must occur, don't make it apartments or townhomes. They don't improve the character of the neighborhood, and they don't fit at this location. I'd rather see a light commercial like a coffee or pastry shop with outside seating options that would encourage pedestrian rather than vehicular traffic. Something like a Lee's Grocery that is located on Central, something that would create a village feel for area residents.
Thank you for your comments. All right, moving on to our next public comment.
Brian Fitzgerald.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. I would point out that the entire area bounded by Indiana to the north, Plymouth to the south, Holden to the east, and North Boulevard to the west is currently public, semi-public, and it includes, for the most part, a large tract of 3 different cemeteries, and then the Radiant Church, formerly I think the Seventh-day Adventist School, in the very southwest portion of it. And it's, other than those and the mausoleum on the Showman's Rest parcel, there are no other buildings on this entire area. It's essentially green space. The particular portion that's at issue is a cutout parcel, and this would be surrounded on 3 sides by cemeteries owned by the city of Tampa or Showman's Rest. And it's currently, both Showman's Rest parcels are listed by the property appraiser as cemetery property. They're both nonprofit and totally exempt from taxes at this point. This particular parcel, as a cutout parcel, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, would have limited access onto North Boulevard. I believe that the cemetery examples that were shown earlier were both at the end of larger cemeteries, not cutout parcels, and they had much more access to various surrounding roads to and from than this parcel would. The current parcel, again, it's as a cutout. If it's developed with up to 15 units of homes, and they'll be completely surrounded by cemeteries, cemetery property, and I think that that's incompatible with the public, semi-public designation of the entire rest of this tract between the boundaries that I described earlier. And again, it's doesn't seem consistent with the public, semi-public designation on the comprehensive plan to cut out this small parcel, leave it open for residential development in the way that's proposed. And that's essentially all I have to say. I don't need the full 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Yep, Stephen Eshkenazi.
That's him, so. No, yeah, sorry, I'm the applicant, so I was just, in case I was not here, but I do not have any additional things to add at this point.
All right, next up.
The last speaker then is Tim Herman.
Thank you. My name is Tim Herman, and I'm a newer resident of the Riverside Heights community. There's a few things I'd like to point out. I do think that there was not enough due diligence done in the report from GeoView to determine definitively that there are no unmarked graves within the area in question. Knowing that we have a Robles Park situation in recent history, it would be very concerning as a resident of a very close neighborhood to have something like that happen again within a short period of time. Additionally, the land use policy 3.5.3 promotes the development that represents the historic character and pattern of the central city neighborhoods. Any future proposed multifamily units will not match the immediate surrounding density. I recognize that within the proposal, they use the residential 10 designation, which could be single family homes, but I think it's quite clear in the supporting documentation that the number of multifamily units as examples of development within the area is going to show that this particular property owner is going to look to do multifamily in the future. Next up, the land use objective 4.2 establishes that the city should protect open space for the recreational, safety, and environmental value and provide adequate park and open space areas throughout the city. The surrounding cemeteries certainly qualify as a historic part of the community. I think the land is also currently inhabited by a pack of coyotes, which one would think falls under the environmental aspect of the land use objective. Lastly, the 2040 plan discusses integration into neighborhoods, and I think what's lacking from the supporting documentation so far, and while I do recognize that this is not a rezoning hearing, I am interested to learn if the applicant has any thoughts around the requirement for commercial use within this particular request to enhance the live, work, play community initiative of the 2040 plan. With that, with all the unanswered questions that we have at the moment, I would urge the commission to vote no on the map amendment until additional information is learned through the GeoView inspection, as well as further discussion on how the rezoning would potentially impact the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, was that it on the public commenting list? All right, then we will turn it right back over to you, Mr. Hudson, the applicant, for a 3-minute rebuttal period.
Great, thank you. Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. I'm not going to use the full 3 minutes lest I get booted. I think the points that were made by the neighbors are valid in the context of a rezoning. Concerns about drainage, traffic impacts, green space, things like that. Those are all things that are absolutely going to come up in any rezoning of the property, and this planning commission, this comp plan amendment is clearly generated some interest, and so I would imagine that interest would travel along with any rezoning that follows. But again, for purposes of where we are this evening, the question is, should the future land use be public for property that is entirely private? There's one point that came up in the briefing as well that I believe Mr. Fitzgerald referenced about the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser's Office referencing this as cemetery. That website's wrong all the time, just to be clear. I don't think it's, and I would, staff can kind of weigh in, but that is not how whether a piece of land is used for a cemetery or not is not based on what the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser's Office says. This land is not used for a cemetery. It is vacant land. It sounds like there may be some animal habitat, which would certainly get figured out in the context of a rezoning and in a permitting exercise. But for where we are this evening, the sole question is, should privately owned, privately used property that has absolutely no public use nonetheless have a public use future land use designation? We think the answer to that is no. There's a lot more to come on this property to address some of the neighborhood concerns and perhaps staff concerns as well. But for this evening, we're asking you to find consistent our request to amend the comp plan status of this parcel from public semi-public to R10, which is exactly what exists in a sea of parcels across North Boulevard. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. All right. With that, I will turn it over to the commissioners for comments and discussions on this item. Not seeing. Oh, yes, Commissioner Kress.
This is kind of a weird one to me. I would argue that, the applicant said there's no public value to this land. And it seems to me like it's just kind of feels like part of a larger park. However, it is privately owned, and I don't really see how we can make an argument that it has to go back to public when it is privately owned. So I agree that all the neighborhood issues can be addressed as part of a kind of a future process. Again, this one is just kind of a weird one to me. You can very easily see both sides to it, but I think it just comes down to, do we really have the authority to tell a private landowner what to do with their land?
Good points, Commissioner Kress. Yes, Commissioner Bernstein.
Yeah, a slightly different note. I think one of the slides that was shown to us during the main presentation indicated that additional studies would need to be done, I think was the word it used. If this moves forward, just verify that there are no graves in the vicinity. And if possible, I might want to put a question to the applicant as to what that might entail and how thorough that process would be. And I ask only because I think a member of the community did echo concerns, which are understandable, that if such a search were to, reveal the existence of graves there, we could have any number of other concerns. And so I think it's a fair question. And I just ask the applicant if perhaps they could respond to that.
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner Bernstein. That's a great question. Steve and I both live in Tampa Heights. We're very familiar with what happened in Randall's Park, and of course, absolutely nobody would want something like that to happen again. The comp plan provision that was on screen alludes to, I think, for properties adjacent to or former cemeteries, to go through more process as you have a better sense of what is going to be built on and what the impacts would be. And we're certainly going to comply with that both in the rezoning and in the permitting. I think at minimum, going to a place like City Council with a rezoning plan and having just what was submitted so far, I think would probably be deemed inadequate. I think, Mike, if you have any thoughts, given that this is your subject specialty, would welcome them, but putting you on the spot a bit.
Sure. We did a fairly comprehensive study. There always is more work that can be done. And in terms of non-intrusive geophysics, the next step would be a three-dimensional evaluation of the property. That has been done on other cemeteries in Tampa. We did what would be called a modified two-dimensional, in which we did a very tight grid, and we also did a physical confirmation of anomalous features that we saw. But you can always do more work on a site, and I would say if there was any historical records that came up and indicated that graves might be there, it might warrant a further investigation. But at this point, with the level of knowledge that we have and information, I think you've done a pretty comprehensive overview of what can be done.
Thank you. Was that okay, Commissioner Bernstein? Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Cardenas.
Yeah, I feel like we're often reactive. This situation with these graves that have come up is relatively new, I think. And, as I kind of look at all this, it kind of makes me think of, how we go about figuring this out. And, in commercial real estate, when you have a building and something comes up with it and you're looking at it, they do something called an environmental study, where not only are they doing soil borings, but they're knocking on the neighbor's doors and finding out that neighbor that's lived there 60 years or X period of time, and really doing more of a search throughout the community and saying, hey, and when you read through some of these environmental reports, you see they knocked on such and such's door, and they, remember, 20 years ago or 40 years ago when they were doing such and such type of work, and, they remember seeing this or seeing that. And the investigation is not just about the soil, but it's also about, trying to do a deeper look. This probably isn't the space to voice this, but I do think that it could be a direction, a thought process on how to better look at this situation.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardenas. Yes, Commissioner Marino.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few questions, and I had a hard time with this the last time it came up, so bear with me. My question for, I believe it's Mr. Whiteman from the geophysicist, the geologist. I'm looking at page, at least of our presentation, or what we have, page 48. And so it's the site map showing site map showing results of geophysical investigation. So you have green dots, blue dots, outlined in black dots. And I understand that you didn't find any graves. You didn't find, I think, what you saw at Zion Cemetery where, I mean, it's pretty obvious it was a box was there at some point. But there's nothing, and this is where I need help on this. The northern portion, that leg that is closest to the mausoleum, was there testing there, number one? And then number two, was this cemetery developed at a time when you had cremations where an urn, which may be of a smaller size, would have been buried on this piece of land? And is it possible that that's what these objects are, as opposed to, like was said, debris or tree stumps?
In terms of the issue of the urns, they're fairly large diameter, and I'm not sure what page it would be in your report, but we did actually provide some samples of the ground penetrating radar data showing the type of features that we are identifying. And typically they were in the range of, I would say, 2 to 3 feet. So an urn is a very isolated small object. From a radar standpoint, it looks like a rock. And so if the objective of a study was to go through and find a buried urn, it would in effect be impossible, because at that site there's a lot of small diameter buried objects, and you literally have to go through and excavate the entire site to treat it like an archaeological dig, taking out layer by layer by layer to see if these little small reflections that you were seeing were an urn versus a rock or a tree stump. And in terms of that northern area, there was dense vegetation, so that area would not have been accessible to the geophysical investigation. So for that area to be addressed, you would have to go through and do a land clearing of it.
Okay, thanks for that, because that's, I mean, just, that's something that I've been trying to kind of work out in my head. And then I just want to make, if I could, just 2 more comments. The first thing I want to say, and this is branching off of what Commissioner Powell said in the last item, we heard a lot of comments where we had folks saying that they were against townhomes, and if we're against apartments and townhomes, we're running out of housing stock. This is within, it's equidistant to St. Joseph's Hospital and downtown Tampa, so it's really an ideal spot to have additional density. It was interesting hearing people say they'd rather have a business there that operates 12 to 14 hours a day instead of homes, which, as I believe, a person sleeps for a large portion of the day and they're at work the rest of the day. So I'm always amazed by people who would rather have a commercial entity that operates 14 hours a day, 7 days a week instead of residences. And then we also heard people say that this is an oasis. This is a place of rest, as far as I can tell. I understand the green space argument. There's plenty of parks over there. There's a lot of parks over there. But it was concerning to me that this is somehow portrayed as an asset to the community, that this burial ground should be promoted as if, it provides all this great benefit to community. And so branching off that last point, the people who are buried here I don't believe they spoke during public comment. And I just don't think I don't think any development here is appropriate. Yes, to Commissioner Kress's point, a private landowner has the right to develop their land as they see fit, but the residents of their land have not spoken to us, and I think without their comment, I wouldn't be able to support this.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, to touch on what Commissioner Marino just brought up, when I'm looking at the aerials and the like Google Maps, I see the brick wall there, and it's consistent all the way down, and encompassing the mausoleum. And I agree with him in the fact that I have the same concerns about, urns being buried, or, maybe, I don't know how far back, I don't know the whole history of this, particular, cemetery, but, I do know at some point that back in the early, 1800s or whenever this was, first, brought about, that people didn't have a lot of money. I mean, poor were really poor, and it could have been a privilege back then in order to, to bury ashes, in an urn. That could have been a privilege, and maybe people had only the ability to just to have them cremated, and maybe ashes were dumped. I don't know, but my point is that, since the wall is consistent all the way down, and we know that there is a more, the mausoleum, that's there, and people are buried right into there. I imagine at some point whenever they were sold, they were probably told that, hey, your surroundings here, this is a cemetery, this is always going to be a cemetery. And the property records does reflect it. I do understand that sometimes the property records is not correct, as someone mentioned earlier, I don't know who said that, but when I'm looking at this, I think that this was always intended to be a cemetery, and I understand that it's private property rights, but for this particular parcel has, I guess my understanding in looking at the property records, that it's still owned by Showman's, correct? So, and if someone wants to interrupt me, that's certainly fine. I mean, this seems to be, maybe it's a development deal where, Showman's is willing to, sell it, to the particular applicant, pending, some of the things that they're going to get. And I don't think that, unless that was to already have happened and a private individual already owns it, to me, what I'm seeing is still owned by cemetery. So it just, from that aspect alone, I think that it needs to stay, as the cemetery. And I agree with my commissioner that I'm not going to support the motion.
Commissioner Powell, if I may, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to let the applicant answer that question about the ownership. I would just also point out that if it still remains in ownership by the Showman's Association, there's a lot of other uses that the Showman's Association could develop on that site under the public, semi-public. Since it is vacant, if they can further determine that there's nobody buried on it, so that public, semi-public does allow some development potential if it still remains in ownership of the Showman's Association. So I'll let the applicant speak to the ownership as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Commissioner Powell, I think the point's well taken. I think the ownership by the entity Showman's Rest, the fact that on the north, there's the wall on the western edge of the entire block, as you alluded to. There's also a wall that separates the southern parcel that's the subject of this amendment from the northern portion of the property, which is the mausoleum, and which was used and is used as a cemetery. But I think just the mere fact that the one entity, not nonprofit corporation, owns two different pieces of land that are used for two different purposes. The southern portion it's not a cemetery. So I'm happy to answer any follow-ups that you might have.
And thank you. And I understand that, and I did, sorry, I ended my comments, but I'm picking back up. I understand that it may not currently be being used as a cemetery, but it certainly looks like to me that there probably was a plan that, that was the plan for, expansion, further, as space became, limited, like elsewhere, from what I'm seeing and from my knowledge of cemeteries. So, and again, that's just where I'm coming from, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Dowdy, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, well, with all due respect to all of my other commissioners, I mean, it may have been planned to be a cemetery and for expansion, but as we know, plans change as time goes by. To be honest, the only concern that I have on this particular piece of property, and it's not a concern that I think the applicant said it. What's the decision before us today is whether or not the land use is consistent with our comp plan for the particular piece of property. So, and all of the concerns that I've heard today really don't speak to that particular issue. I share the concern, the only concern that I would have for development on this particular piece of property is, are there any bodies buried under the ground? I have been involved with projects adjacent to cemeteries where, during the course of development, they've discovered that, and it's not an issue. I mean, it's an unpleasant situation, and it causes a lot of grief. But just the fact that there might be something, there's no records of it, nobody has any information, somebody buried somebody on a spot that's not where they were supposed to have been buried, isn't a reason, I don't see, on our part to deny a private owner the actual, best use of his property. He's not asking for anything unreasonable. He's asking for the land use that's the entire surrounding area has. We are constantly, as a public agency, going through and changing land uses on properties when we say, hey, that didn't really fit. It kind of got done in a big block at one point in time 20, 30 years ago, and now we're finding out our mistake. I personally don't see any problem with the application and what's before us, and I mean, I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Commissioner Dowdy. Yes, Commissioner Bernstein.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and I'm certainly sympathetic to the points that some of my fellow commissioners have made. But at the end of the day, I think our duty is to, apply the comprehensive plan as it's written, and it's written, on behalf of the citizens who are largely alive and benefiting from the plan today. Obviously, we'd want to make sure, and it sounds like the applicant's committed to doing this, to ensuring that there are no graves and no risk of desecration. But I think I'm a little troubled by the notion of encumbering property based solely or largely on the fact that it's held by interests that have ownership over, let's call it what it is, a business that happens to be a cemetery. And I think on that basis, my focus would, I prefer to put my focus on the process of safeguarding and ensuring against the possibility of any grave desecration, rather than trying to advocate on behalf of a group of citizens who are no longer on this side of the ground. But I'll certainly concede we don't get many issues like this one in front of us.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernstein. Any comments? Yes, Commissioner Cardenas.
I think I've gone full circle on this since this first presented itself. As I think about it, and I think about what type of decisions we're here to make, and what based on that, and thinking about what we're supposed to do, and also thinking about individual property rights, and thinking about who is the onus on to do this, to figure out what's there, what's not there. If a private property owner wants to build on their lot and build on their land, and we have a situation like this, to me, it's the onus of local government and zoning, or whoever it may be, to make sure that the right search is done, the right studies are conducted to figure out whether or not there are graves there or not. Looking at this, I can't say that it would be upon us to make that specific decision, or it's upon us to make a decision based on land use. So that's kind of where I'll be on this.
Good comments, Commissioner Cardenas. Are there any more comments or discussion from the commissioners on this item? Not seeing, let me check for hands raised online. Not seeing any hands raised online or any lights on in the room, then we will go ahead and close the public comment and open it up to motions on this item from commissioners. Commissioner Dowdy, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the commission find proposed future land use designation change for City of Tampa CPA 2013 from public, semi-public to residential 10 on the 1.56 plus or minus acres consistent with Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan and forward the recommendation to City Council.
All right, that was a consistency finding from Commissioner Dowdy. Did I hear a second? Commissioner?
I'll second that.
I have a second by Commissioner Cardenas. Is there any discussion on this item from the commissioners? More discussion? No hands? All right, then I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on this item.
Bernstein?
Yes.
Cardenas? Yes. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Commissioner Cardenas?
Yes.
Thank you. Dick? Commissioner Dick? Dowdy?
Yes.
Kress?
Yes.
Marino?
No.
Powell?
No.
Joseph?
Yes.
All right, motion carried 5-2. Commissioners Marino and Powell voted no.
Thank you. All right, thank you, staff, for the presentation. Thank you to the applicant, to the citizens who provided comments. On to our next item, 2C, TACPA 21-14, Comprehensive Plan Amendment, 2111 North Albany Avenue. Presenter is Danny Collins.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Danny Collins with your Hillsborough County staff. Our next case, or our next plan amendment is TACPA 2114. It's for the property located at 2111 North Albany Avenue. The subject site is in the Central Tampa Planning District. It's within the Old West Tampa neighborhood. It's within the West Tampa National District. This is not within the local historic district. And it's located here on our locational map. Here's an aerial of the subject site and the surrounding properties. The site's outlined in this black color. It's at the southeast corner of West Pine Street and North Albany Avenue. Oops. The subject site is predominantly surrounded by residential uses to the north, east, south, and west of the site. It is 1 block east of North Howard Avenue, which contains predominantly non-residential uses on this portion of North Howard. And it's a couple blocks to the west of North Rome Avenue, which also contains non-residential uses. Here is an aerial of the subject site. This is looking east at the subject site from North Albany Avenue. There is a cigar factory that presently occupies the subject site. Here is looking at the southern portion of the plan amendment site from North Albany Avenue. Again, this is the cigar factory, and this is the southern portion of the site. This is standing on West Pine Street, looking southwest at the plan amendment site. This is looking east along West Pine Street. The plan amendment site's on our right. This is looking northeast at the plan amendment site from the intersection of West Walnut Street and North Albany Avenue. And then this is looking north on North Albany Avenue. And here's, again, this is the cigar factory on the right-hand side. Just a quick background of the request. This is a privately initiated amendment. It's small scale in size. It's approximately 1.33 acres. The subject site has 2 future land use designations. A portion of the site is currently recognized in the light industrial designation, and then the remaining portion of the site is within the residential 35. This request is in the entire site, so it is recognized under the residential 35 designation. Here is the adopted future land use map. Again, the subject site outlined in this black color. The northwestern portion of the site shown in this gray color is currently recognized under the light industrial designation. And then the eastern portion and southern portions of the site are recognized under the residential 35 designation. That residential 35 surrounds the subject site on all sides to the north, south, east, and west. 1 block to the west on Howard Avenue, we have parcels that are recognized under the CC 35 designation. 1 block to the north is a parcel that's recognized in the light industrial designation. There is a another cigar factory that occupies this site to the north. And then a couple blocks to the east of the subject site along North Rome Avenue, we have parcels that are recognized under the neighborhood mixed use 35 designation. And then there are a few parcels along North Rome Avenue that are also recognized under that light industrial designation. Here is the proposed future land use map showing the change. This would recognize the entire site under that residential 35. Here's a slide showing the potential impacts of the amendments. Currently, under the light industrial and residential 35 designation, the entire site can be considered for 23 dwelling units, or just over 61,000 square feet of non-residential development. As proposed under the residential 35 designation, the subject site can be considered for 46 dwelling units, or 34,759 square feet of non-residential development. There is a structure, like I stated, there's a cigar factory on the site that has potential for a historic designation, and based on land use policy 5.1.7, there may be additional units that exceed the maximum 46 units if the existing cigar factory is redeveloped, and that's that policy talks about adaptive reuse. The Planning Commission staff reviewed the request and found it consistent with several sections of the comprehensive plan. Staff found it consistent with the city design and city planning strategy by promoting a range of uses in proximity to each other, and also encouraging infill development on vacant and underutilized lands. The request was also found to be consistent with the urban villages and infrastructure policies by directing the highest share of growth to the urban villages. The request was also found to be consistent with the housing policies and providing housing opportunities in the West Tampa urban village. And finally, the request was consistent with the housing and multifamily residential policies by ensuring there is an adequate supply of housing to support Tampa's present and future populations. Based on those considerations, the Planning Commission staff recommends that the proposed amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. That concludes my presentation, and I believe Dave Mechanic is on the line, and he has a presentation. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, can you all hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is David Mechanic. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Omar Garcia for the plan amendment at 2111 North Albany Avenue. The staff report was extremely thorough, and I'll try not and repeat what was already presented to you. I would like to just mention that my client is intending to rehabilitate the historic cigar factory with 40 multifamily units, and then develop adjacent vacant land for 10 townhome units. And as Danny mentioned, because of the fact that this would be a historic rehabilitation, we are permitted to construct 40 multifamily units within the cigar factory building. I would just like to point out, and I'm being a little repetitious, but I'd just like to point out that we are in fact furthering several policies of the plan, promoting higher density in the urban villages, and we are promoting use of land, which is of course a limited resource, and you always want to encourage redevelopment within urban infill areas as opposed to urban sprawl, which we are certainly contributing to the development of the urban infill. Policies that encourage more housing opportunities, and of course, preservation of historic structures. With that, we will be happy to answer any questions you might have, and we would respectfully request your support of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Is there anyone sign up for this one? No?
No, sir.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, in that case, I kind of lost. Oh, over to the planning commissioners for comments or discussion on this item. Not seeing. Oh, Commissioner Bernstein, yes.
Just very briefly to the applicant, just based on the description I heard, these are the kind of projects I hope we see more of in front of this commission. We've talked many times about density, the need just in the last few minutes to make sure parts of Tampa, particularly in the central core, receive their share of investment. And so I guess I, for one, am glad this is before us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Bernstein. Any more comments or discussion from the commissioners on this item? Seeing none, I will go on ahead and close public comment and open it up to motions from the commissioners on this item. Commissioner Bernstein, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, I would move that we find TACPA 20-14 consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and that we pass it along for approval.
Thank you. All right, that's a consistency motion by Commissioner Bernstein. Is that a second from you, Commissioner Kress?
Second, Commissioner Kress.
And a second to that consistency motion by Commissioner Kress. Is there any more discussion among the commissioners on this item? Not seeing any and seeing no hands, I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on this item.
Bernstein?
Yes.
Cardenas?
Yes.
Dick? Downey?
Yes.
Kress?
Yes.
Marino?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to staff for all your time and information. Thank you to all the public who gave their time and comments. And this meeting is adjourned at 8:22. Everyone have a good night.